Call to order our City of Conway's Community Parents Board meeting. Maybe we should restart this. It's sounding a little... All right, let's go ahead and call to order our... Take three.
That Halloween echo.
The City of Halloween is really in the microphones. All right, welcome to the City of Conway's Community Parents Board meeting. I'm calling to order the meeting. And first on our agenda, we're looking to seek approval for the minutes from our September the 10th meeting.
For anyone who would like to look at them, if you want to, real briefly, they are behind your orange tab.
Okay,
I make a motion we approve the minutes.
thank you. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those are approved and will be submitted into the record. Today, we are not going to be seeking any formal items. Instead, we have a workshop on historic design review district guidelines. So thank you, Ms. Dennis, for putting together this opportunity for us to review and learn.
Yeah.
So take it away. Thank you.
Absolutely. So first, we'll just touch on your notebooks that are in front of you since they are a little bit new. We have a tab index at the very front of your notebook that tells you exactly which tab different things will be behind. They will be the same each time. There are two little sections that are empty today behind the red and the pink. The red will be where your packet will typically be placed, and then behind the pink would be where if we had tree board agenda items, that's where all of the tree board information would go, or if we had any additional items that we were going to cover on an agenda or anything of that nature, that would be behind the pink. Anything outside of CAB's typical agenda would go in the pink section. So like the tree board stuff mostly. And then we did print out and give you guys a copy of the HDRD guidelines. They are in need of being updated. There are some things in there that have changed, and it's just most things, it refers to a couple different ordinances or a couple different places to find things that are no longer in existence, or the article names have changed. So that's just something that staff's going to have to work on along to update, since it is such an extensive document. And the yellow tab that is directly behind your guidelines, there's like a small sticky note tab in that same section. That is the most updated CAB application. So it has the new information, most current information, with a disclaimer about scam artists that are out there. Unfortunately, the City of Conway, we do have some people who have fell victim to that, and they were receiving bills that were from us for staff time, but they were not actually from us. So we had to update a couple things and change a few things as well, and that is in that same section. Immediately following that would be the ordinance section of our UDO that outlines the board's role and your procedures in a very detailed manner. We're going to go over it very overview. You guys can ask more detailed questions if y'all have it, if we don't cover it. But this will be kind of your go-to if you're trying to figure out, well, how do I do this, or can we do that? That UDO section will tell you if the board has the jurisdiction to do that. And then the next tab is Article E of the General Code. That is our preservation tax incentive program. That's the ordinance for it. We have not seen one of these in a while, but we do have one property that is currently under contract for purchase, and the new buyers are extremely eager to pursue this preservation tax incentive, so there could be one before too long. So we wanted to go ahead and put that in there so you guys could re-familiarize yourself with it, what you guys would need to look for, what the applicant has to present, and things of that nature for you all to be able to grant approval for them to receive a preservation tax incentive, which ultimately is a 15-year tax freeze. And the very last thing in the binders is the tree preservation ordinance. So this is the most updated version that we have, and we wanted to go ahead and include it in your binders. That way it can be there each week for you. For when we do have tree board items, you guys can refer to it if you need to during the meeting, or ponder it yourself and ask us more specific questions that we can try to answer for you. So that is the basic overview of our new books. Unfortunately, we do not have the wonderful abilities to provide computers, laptops, iPads, wonderful things like that. We wish we could, but this is the next best thing that we got for you guys. So we're going to just begin to print our packets each week to try and help with that. That way you can all see it up close. I know we do send it out to you guys digitally. We have some boards, they bring their own computers, iPads, they even look at it on their phones sometimes, so you guys are free to do that as well. If you don't like the paper or would prefer it digitally, you have that ability as well. So do y'all have any questions on the book or anything of that nature?
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I like it.
So I have a question. So
Yeah.
this is going to like live here, and when we come to our meetings, you'll have the new material that we need for that current meeting.
Correct.
In place. Okay,
Correct.
Thank you.
And all of the items that are in your binder, they're also online, so you can easily find them. If you want us to send out the titles of each one so you know exactly where to find them, or a link or anything like that in an email so that all of you have it so you can look at it digitally at home, we're more than happy to do that. But this is also just so you have it during the meeting if you want to look back at something or verify. Okay. And, well, make sure there was no more questions on the book. You guys good?
Good.
All right, so first we wanted to kind of just start with what would technically fall under the Article 14, which is under your blue tab. This is the duties and powers of the Community Appearance Board. We did try to give a synopsis of it, but the very detailed, very wordy breakdown is in section 14.1.2. It's duties and powers. So basically, CAB is a review board. So CAB would have jurisdiction over the Central Business District, the Main Street Overlay Corridor, all the way up to 16th Avenue along Main Street, and then the WRD District. And basically what it says is you guys are a review board at nature. So once an application comes to staff, staff then brings it to the board, and then at that point the board gets involved. You do your review. There's 3 different types of review. There's a conceptual, a preliminary, and then a final review. Applicants don't always have to go through all 3. They can request a conceptual, and at that point you guys would not have to make an official vote. It's just kind of they present, this is what we would like to do. Do you have any feedback? What would you prefer to see? Things of that nature. And then preliminary is kind of the middle ground. You can give, you can actually vote or and give final approval if the applicant provides enough information and the board feels comfortable to do so at that time. Or you can request more information, they can come back at a later date. So it's kind of the middle ground between conceptual and final, but you do make a vote there. And then final approval is just that, final approval if they do a preliminary official and then come back for the final on the second review, then that's whenever you would give your absolute vote at that point in time. And you guys are also, I wanted to point this out, you guys are also the reviewing authority for the city of Conway, and you are the ones, the section we were talking about, the preservation tax incentive, that's in partnership with the Bailey Bill and the National Register of Historic Places. So you guys are actually the ones that are in charge of reviewing the applications for that and making sure that the applicant meets the standards or the requirements to be qualified for the preservation tax incentive. And then they would then proceed with the process if you guys grant them qualifying authority. There's a section of it that they have to go through the county. There's all kinds of outside things that they also have to do outside of just this board to receive the full 15-year for city and county taxes.
When somebody submits a community appearance board, how do you know which of the three, conceptual, final, and preliminary?
So if it's listed under certificates of appropriateness, it would not be considered a conceptual review. You will be made aware that it is a conceptual review. It would be in a different section on the agenda, because at that point in time, you would not, at that meeting, be issuing a COA. You would only be discussing and giving feedback at that point in time. So anything under the certificate of appropriateness section that is typically listed on your agenda, those would be your preliminary or final.
Troy, are you talking about if somebody just comes in and wants to apply to CAB, how do they know?
Yeah, is that a checkbox on the form?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
on the
not
app,
the
yeah.
application, but, you know, typically if it's like a new build or something like that, or a new project, then they would want to come for conceptual review, but a sign, something like that, that's typically just a final.
What is our review? Is it, do we personally like it, or does it meet the guidelines?
So the guidelines are your roadmap. The guidelines are not necessarily a rule book. It is just that, a guide to what is recommended or is not recommended to be considered historic nature. There is a table in this packet. It is A12 in the Historic Design Review Guidelines. It breaks down different types of requests that could require full CAB review or could require and be approved on an administrative level. So there's different things that you guys do have purview over and different things that you don't. A lot of times, most of the time, that is determined before it comes before the board. Because if it can be done on an administrative level, we're not gonna bring it before you guys. We're just gonna do it on our end, file it as an administrative COA, and move on. We're not gonna bring it before the board for y'all to review something that you don't have purview over.
I mean, but like, somebody brings in a sign, easy example, and they've got the sign and, you know, it's on the facade of the building, and they want to put it a third offset because it matches up with something below. But the guideline, you know, it meets the guidelines, but we think it should not be there. Our personal preference is it's not there. Do we have the ability to say, no, we don't like it?
You can't say you don't like it simply because you don't like it. It's time, place, and manner that it would have to meet to be able to regulate it. So let's say, I do have a couple examples in here. So this would be an example of something that it did come before you guys, but it was not this specific request. The ladies over in our municipal court,
Right.
they had originally wanted to approach the board with two different options. The same awning on either side of the building with the front awning containing a sign, which would be what it looked like here. They were then told that the city did not want to pursue with the signage on it, so that's why they decided just to come to the board to receive permission for the awning. But had they brought this before you guys and y'all did not like the way it was written there, or you didn't feel like that met the historic nature of what the building used to look like or current standard or anything of that nature, you could tell them no signage. But you would have to state, other than I just don't like the way it looks, you would have to state a reason. It would have to be it's too large, or the coloring doesn't match what it would have been at a different time period, something of that nature. Correct, Jessica?
Yeah,
Or-
you have to use the guidelines for
To-
signage.
You have to use
For
guidelines.
To make a denial.
Yes, to
But
deny.
what about if I was to say, well, typically in the downtown district, we don't see printing on awnings?
Typically in our downtown district, you may not, but in a historic downtown area, there may have been at one point in time. So if the guidelines.
Right,
could-
that's my question, is like, no one else is printing on awnings downtown, why should we do
Well, you
that?
can't necessarily deny just because no one else has done it here yet.
Yeah.
If it is in the guidelines as a allowable thing, that the board does have the ability to allow it because of historic, nature or anything of that nature, then you can. But you just can't deny just because you don't like the way it looks or you don't like the color. You have to have an actual example from the guidelines of to why you are denying the placement or the coloring of the sign.
Cause when
And
I
it-
first came on, example, that, condo building,
Down, that was gonna be at the river.
gonna be at the river. My first meeting before everybody switched off, it was talking about paint colors.
Right,
The guidelines, that has nothing to do with paint colors.
right.
My personal preferences, I don't, and that person saying, I don't like peach paint color.
Yeah.
So they didn't get, or whatever color it was.
Right,
But CAB shouldn't be doing that, right?
correct.
Okay. So
It is, paint and lighting are very,
got to-
difficult.
The UDO actually provides standards for painting. It limits the number of colors that you can have on a building, and it also recommends earth tones. So if somebody wanted to come in and paint a building.
fluorescent green, then it
Right.
doesn't
We would
match.
have the ability per the UDO to deny that.
But if they wanted a light tan instead of a dark tan,
Right, that would be
Okay.
acceptable. And also the guidelines do give, guidance on awning signage, and where they would wanna put the municipal court, that's where it's recommended, but there is a size limitation. It's not generally, they would prefer, the ordinance states it would be preferable not to have an awning sign, but if it is the only place to do it, that is the appropriate location to put the awning sign.
Instead of putting a giant City of Conway decal on the large portion of the
so you
awning.
pick probably the only building downtown that actually would be appropriate per the guidelines to put signage on, but
That's why it was a good example.
exactly. Good job.
And just to point out, like, if there's none right now, no awnings right now that have, text on them, it's just like, this is a moment in time, but there probably was, I don't know,
Yeah.
however many years ago, it just, at this moment, there might not be.
This board has approved awning signage downtown. It's been a while.
Yeah.
So we have to have, our objections have to be rooted in
The guidelines.
the guidelines, not personal preference.
Correct.
Okay.
It is you guys are a subjective board, but the subjectiveness is still guided and steered by the HDRD guidelines.
Okay.
So this is still your roadmap. Again, it's not a rule book, so there have been a couple things that have come before the board that may be in the guidelines that were not recommended instead of recommended, but the board felt that in that specific instance, it still added to a historic character for that specific business or home or location. So then you do have that ability to kind of maneuver around in it. But if you are to just outright deny something, you have to have a reason rooted in the guidelines. Other than I just don't like it, if that makes sense. This, while we're on signage, we're using this as an example, just as, just kind of a reminder that you guys give approval, but the approval is not always a requirement. So when an applicant brings a sign or a building reconstruction, facade upgrade, whatever be the case, they come to you guys and they're asking, hey, this is what I'd like to do. Is this okay? And then we go through and make sure it meets the UDO before it comes to you. Then it comes to you. You guys use the guidelines to determine yes, no, this needs to be a little bit different. And then you grant your approval. Once you grant that approval, that applicant then has 2 years to decide if they want to continue with what you approved. That does not mean it is required that they install what you approved. They're just, again, asking for your permission. It would be kind of like me on a Friday night in high school saying, hey, Mom, can I go to the football game on Friday night? She says, yeah. Well, then on Friday night, I was like, I don't feel like going. I'm just stay home. It's kind of the same thing. They ask for the moon and the stars, you give them the moon, they can install the moon, they just can't install the stars.
Now, how do, if we do it as for instance, Crooked Oak, they had an issue with the brick lintel, so they didn't want to put brick above the lintel, because they had to put a special lintel in and other stuff, and so they decided to put stucco. And then they said, we'll put the stucco, but it's covered by this awning. So the board, I don't think would have approved just stucco on the facade of the building, but since it's covered by the awning, then yes, we approve it. And then Crooked Oak says economic reasons, which is probably a very true and honest reason.
Right.
I'm not gonna put my awning up. Well, part of the approval of the stucco of not having the brick remain was the fact you're putting the awning up. How do we,
That's a great
So-
example.
So unless it is stated, Jessica, correct me if I'm wrong, but unless it is stated specifically in the motion, then it cannot be enforced or upheld as a condition just because you discussed it during a meeting.
Okay.
But they presented it as such.
It has to be a condition done and made in the motion. And even then, they still have approval for 2 years. They may come back with 2 days to go on their 2-year time and throw up an awning. But you guys have already approved that,
We
so,
approved it because it was presented as such. We say approve as presented.
correct,
That means that it was presented as stucco with awning.
correct. But you do not have the ability to require they install exactly what unless they come back to you with a different design and request approval for a different design. It would be like the Glam Squad ladies here, or the Glam Studio, excuse me, coming in originally with a gold awning. And you guys said, you know what, yeah, that's fine, we like the gold, it looks good. Well, then they get there and they're looking at it, they don't like the gold. So then, instead of just changing it to black, because you guys said the awning could be there, they had to come back because the color of the awning changed. Does that make sense?
But if they put no awning up, then we have.
And you approved as presented, then they're not required to put an awning up.
Even
and
though
the
they
same-
presented gold.
even though they presented a
Correct.
black awning, they're not required to put it
Correct.
up because.
Correct.
So our motion should be more robust in repeating back to them what exactly they're agreeing to do, maybe?
Yes.
Because it says approved as submitted. It's-
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, if you want to place conditions on a, particular property as
Yes.
part of their request, then it needs to be stated in the motion.
Yeah.
And then that would give staff the teeth to
Sure.
use.
But McKinney, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not that it was a condition. They
Right,
were just
how are
going
those
along with
conditions
what they
when that's
said.
what they actually provided in the imagery?
Because they said.
Because what the board, what I'm understanding, and again, I wasn't here at the bulk of when all of that was going on, but my understanding based off of what Mackenzie just explained was they presented an issue building structurally to you guys as this is why we cannot put this back, which may have been a historical requirement at the time. This is why we can't use that specific material. Can we use this material?
And cover it with the awning.
But if they said we would like to put an awning, but they also did state that there was a long period of lead time at the time. So then the board is approving a facade material change, number one, and then approving an awning to be installed on top of that material change. Not approving the material change because it's going to be covered by the awning. That's the difference. You're approving the material change first with the assumption that they will install the awning. But in reality, if you did not approve, if you approved and said approved as presented, no, approved with the condition that stucco is to be used as a material provided the awning is installed, then at that point, the awning would then be a requirement to install over the stucco. But you approved a material change and then also approved installation of an awning. That's two separate items, not two items used as a condition of each other. Does that make sense?
You
Even though it
approved
was
the ability of
presented.
them to put in an awning.
Correct.
Even though it
But
was
you can't
presented-
enforce them to do so. You just
Correct.
gave them approval to put
Correct.
it in.
Even though when they presented, they said, we will use stucco here and cover it with the awning.
It would be like these ladies here coming in and saying, we're gonna put this sign up here that says the Glam Studio by Chelsea with the little thing around it. And then her saying, never mind, I don't want by Chelsea. But you guys already approved by Chelsea to be on around. She has the right to remove that by Chelsea.
Yeah, but the difference there, we'll have to watch our wording, was we want stucco, but because we want stucco, we will cover it with an awning.
But that was the applicant.
That was the applicant
Correct.
telling us that, so we said, as approved, as submitted. So they told us that it was gonna be stucco with an awning covering it. That's the reason they got us to convince the stucco.
Right.
And then, well, we'll take the awning down, or we didn't put it up because we can take them down. It
I
was,
think they actually provided in, a picture of what it would look like without the awning
Yeah.
as well. So there was one with the awning and one without the awning.
To show what was behind the awning.
to show what was behind the awning, not
Yeah.
to show what it looked like without the awning.
But that was just for convenience and understanding, right?
Yeah.
Of what the stucco would be, because we wanted to make sure the Art Deco
Right,
piece
'cause-
was still there. Like if
it
they
is.
say, we're gonna put the awning up, oh, and trust us, we're keeping the Art Deco detail behind, I'm like, show me that you're gonna keep that
Yeah.
stair step.
Yeah.
So that's probably why they showed us both.
And we're gonna do the additional nice brick, gorgeous piece on the front, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
in trade, we'll do everything else, and then, well, cost-wise, it doesn't work now, so we're not doing it.
Yeah. And also speaking of that, and then a matter of Crooked Oak, something that, not to pick over Crooked Oak, Chris. if
No,
you're
because Chris has
listening,
done a great
love
job,
you.
and Chris is
Chris
an
and Jackie.
excellent member of this community.
The problem is we agreed that brick archway, which is lovely, but they also presented like a piece of artwork, like a sculpture, like a gold sculpture was gonna be put in that little brick archway. You know, and I know they don't have to put that in now, it's their choice, but it's sort of like, how do you bifurcate the two different elements of, like Mackenzie said, like the awning and the stucco? The archway, which now looks naked without something like in its centerpieces, or like with the flower boxes that were empty for years, full of garbage. Like, how do you, someone says, I'm gonna put flower boxes here with flowers. Like, is that, do we have to continue to tease apart all the
I
elements?
guess my question too, on top of that is, so what are the restrictions to the applicant when something changes? What deems having to come back before the board?
It depends on what they're changing. So you
like,
go
but like
back
in
to
this
your
glam
table.
studio, if the awning's currently red and they present an image like this and say, we want to change the awning to black, we want to do the signage, like, in our minds, that's the finished product.
Correct.
So it doesn't, like, we're not looking at it with possibly a red awning. I would think if they wanted to say, oh, we're gonna take that off, they'd have to come back. But
So to play devil's advocate just a little bit, a lot of our downtown businesses are mom and pop businesses. There are a lot of things, I don't know if any of you have ever opened, many of you have, your own businesses. When you begin the process of starting your own business, there is a multitude of things that get thrown at you that you're like, why didn't anybody tell me this? Didn't expect plumbing, didn't expect this, didn't expect that. So she may have come to us at the very beginning of her entire process, immediately following signing a lease, and asked, because this is her ultimate goal. This is what she wants it to look like. And you gave her approval to do it because it does look good. She gets approval, she does half of it right now because she runs out of money. The awning stays red, everything else gets done because that's all she can afford right now. You do not have the ability to tell her you have to do it within a certain amount of time. The only thing you have the ability to do is grant approval for 2 years. Once that 2 years lapse, if she still could not afford to replace that awning, the red one, with the beautiful black that was presented, then at that time she would then have to come back and say, hey, I didn't have the money at the time, whatever be the case, this is why I didn't do it. I want to do the same black, nothing's changed, same material, same color, everything. And then you grant her another approval, and then she can put the awning up 8 months later, a year and a half later. She still has that time to do it.
But what if she decides, I really like the red now? Does she
Then-
ever have to come back?
No, that's her prerogative as a
Because we
business
gave
owner.
her the authority to change it if she kind of.
Correct. She's not
If she
required
wanted
to change it.
Right. We
So
we don't enforce it once.
Correct.
we-
It almost becomes like an itemized,
Yeah, like I'm
Like
not approving the
approval
pink
process.
wall with the red awning.
Yeah.
That looks terrible. So
Well, then-
it's,
and then that-
it's like a
Yep,
Then you have to be specific.
yep.
just
And
Do we
that's-
have to do them individually?
So that is one main reason why we always take signage separately, because usually signage is more detailed than a lot of other things going on. But yes, if it comes before you with lighting, signage, awning change, and paint, you need to make an itemized motion. We approve this signage as the signage was presented. We approve this paint, But again, in this situation, if the awning was currently red and you wanted to approve this image, you couldn't just say we approve the paint color and we approve the awning change, because then you still didn't make the two conditional upon each other.
We need to do, in that situation, we need to make our motion of, this is approved as submitted if everything in that drawing is completed. If it is not completed, it is not approved.
Well, here is my concern with that is, you know, that you have to make sure that you're staying within the time, place, and manner. You know, the Supreme Court has said, you know, there have been lots of cases that said the city does have the ability to require beautification of their downtown areas in certain, especially historic districts. But when you're reading the guidelines and somebody wants to do something like rehabilitate the exterior of their building, the goal and the role of CAB and the guidelines is to ensure that what they are doing is compliant with the guidelines. You know, not necessarily that the look of it is something that is acceptable. How does it, you know, pay tribute to the building before it was restored or rehabilitated? So if you deny something or put a condition on something, I would encourage you to make sure that there's a guideline that you're basing that off of so that you avoid an appeal of that decision. You don't want something to be appealed just because, one, they didn't put something up that you approved, or that it didn't look the way you wanted it to look, because that would be an easy situation for a judge to say, no, they can't do that. If there's, you know, First Amendment, you know, violations that they would probably use if that were to ever go to court.
Because I love working in the city of Conway the way it's done, and it's done the way it should be done, I believe. But you work in a municipality west of us, or east of us, and they will actually take the submittal outside to the building and look, confirm everything 100% is done that way, and if not, you do not get your CO.
Could you make it contingent? Like the manner is contingent, the time, place, manner. Like the manner of, you may paint the building pink so long as the awning is also replaced in a black, which is what they've presented. Like, that's my question, is the manner in which they're improving the space, but also making each element contingent on the next within their design that they've presented to us.
Because otherwise, your approval would be different.
Yes.
Does this particular location have a red awning still?
We're just using it
I
as
don't-
an
that was-
example.
was not.
They don't have an awning at all.
I made that color up
Yeah.
in my
But
example.
if they have a red awning
I'm
now,
sorry, I'm slow.
They do not have an awning at all currently, and you guys did approve this image, but when she got the building painted with her signage, and I know she put some pretty florals out there for the ribbon cutting that stayed open, or stayed up for a good while because they were very pretty. She may have found that she preferred it without the awning, and that's not necessarily something that the board has the ability to enforce absolute requirement of a approval.
So,
You are bound to just,
so when they, so Crooked Oak says, I'm gonna put flower boxes around those pillars, is that the flower boxes are allowed contingent on the fact that you put flowers in them?
if you make that your
Because
motion.
otherwise they're full of litter. Like that's the thing. Like I think that, yes, it's reasonable for this business owner to say, the flowers look nice, the awning's expensive, let's push off the installation. But then like in the instance of the flower boxes, outside of Crooked Oak, like I don't want to sit here and have nickel and dime people being like, and with flowers, or oh, and with this. Like that just seems redundant and repetitive and obtuse, sort
Well,
of, you
and
know.
the issue with the flower boxes is he received the approval to do the flower box.
Yeah.
He didn't have to receive approval to plant flowers because landscaping was not a requirement for that building to be redone.
Right.
So in theory, he did what you approved.
Mm-hmm.
The only disconnect is the assumption of the board and the understanding of the board that there would be flowers in the flower box, because it's implied.
Yeah.
But again, you do not have the jurisdictional regulation to require it and enforce it.
Okay, let's switch to one other than Crooked Oak. Beat Chris up, he does such a great job for us. Let's go to the steakhouse that has not been built.
Correct.
They have a building
I know
there.
she has a picture of it somewhere, right?
We did not like, one of the walls was too flat. Had no
Don't
deep.
say you didn't like it. It did not meet the
It did
warehouse
not meet,
historical
it did not
standard.
meet the warehouse historic district because of the fact there was just a lot, flat wall.
Right.
And to allay that concern, they added, I think, Bahama shutters. Let's use that as an example. That they added Bahama shutters to it to get the board's approval to move forward. They bring, you know, they go back, they hear all of our concerns, all 50 concerns, one of which is that flat wall.
Right.
And they come back to us and they add Bahama shutters on the side of the building. And so it's approved as submitted. Then, near the end of construction, they've had change orders, or they just said, I don't really like these Bahama shutters, I'm not gonna put them on.
If you may, I'm pretty positive, because I'm remembering that final motion in 2023, the August final motion in 2023, those shutters were mentioned in
So
the motion.
But what I'm getting, we have got to be specific in our motion, because anything we give, let's put it this way, anything we give to approved as submitted, if they want to make a change to remove something, they can remove it. Unless the motion says, now, if they want to add something, then they got to come back to us.
Correct, because you're only granting them approval to do what they have asked to do.
Right.
You are not granting them requirement to install what they presented to you.
So like Horry County, the library, they submit to us a picture that scales out historical muttons. You know, inch and eighth historical muttons, perfectly scaled out, looks great. And they put windows in with 7/8 inch muttons. We should have made the motion that says you have got to have the correct muttons per the guidelines.
You can do that in your motion, but with the library, that was a very specific approval, because what they presented to you guys were the construction plans. Cowboys is a little bit like that too, because there was question, I do believe it was Troy that called it, the pitches on the roof pitch, they weren't matching across every sheet in the construction plans, or maybe it was Jamie. And that was brought to their attention. Those construction plans is what the board approved. That's what you are approving on a new construction. You're not approving just pretty pictures. So whatever is presented in the construction plans that are presented to you is also what you're saying. Material type is often listed there. Material colors are often listed there. The sizes, measurements of things.
They didn't measure it scaled out an inch and an eighth, but they didn't specifically say an inch and an eighth. And so that when they installed the 7/8, we have no jurisdiction to tell them to go install a window that actually looks appropriate.
Because whatever the approved construction plans that were presented to CAB at that meeting is what they have to present to get their permit. When they present to get their permit, or turn in to get their permit, that is what the building department goes off of, and that is what the building department and planning staff reviews to verify the
And
very
it doesn't
last thing.
specifically say it, even though it scales it. you
That's
got-
the thing, that we looked at the image, we looked at the
We
window
looked at-
and said, that looks,
Unfortunately, you've got to, if that's how close in proximity and just very descriptive you want something to be specific on a building, you've got to be specific in your motion.
okay. So the lesson here is that if something comes up to us, it's beautiful, it's perfect, go ahead and move on. But we have chatter as a board on issues, concerns, like I'm thinking about the gas station with the brick. Jamie with the new Sinclair over here, like Jamie put that in the motion very clearly that all the brick in all three venues have to match. Like that's an example where had we just said, oh yeah, approved is presented, you know, that they might not have to actually do that unless it's part of the motion.
Correct.
So, and they have our approval is 2 years, but like Cowboys, if they get their permit January the 1st of next year, so then they can have their time to build it. Or it
Yes.
has to be built within the 2 years.
No.
Okay.
They just need to pull permits with the approved plans within that time period, because the permits are then the building department's responsibility.
Gotcha.
Permits are good for 6 months, they automatically renew, after every inspection for another 6 months, whether you pass or fail it. So, you pull a permit in January, you are guaranteed January 1 to July 1.
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything.
Yeah, yeah.
But you call for an inspection on January 1st, you fail it, you get December 1st, or
July
January
2nd.
1.
And I
July,
want to
thank
be
you.
clear, the 2 years comes from our zoning, or not our zoning orders, but the UDO, where it talks
Correct.
about vested rights.
Mhm.
So just like a development plan on a piece of property, you have a 2-year vested right period. That's where the 2 years comes from. Any approved plan is good for 2 years. Now, you can ask to have those vested rights extended for up to 5 years, I believe. So, but if they come back to the board and ask for reapproval, then that time period would start over. And when it comes to Cowboys and Crooked Oak, to use those two as an example, the difference in my mind is that Crooked Oak 1 is an established structure. Only the front facade, was really what was changed, except when you go down that alley. And if you approve the awning and you approve the facade, it's very, very difficult to require, or for the building department to not allow a CO simply because the awning wasn't installed. That's something that could be added at any time. Versus something like Cowboys, they could decide not to build it at all, and there's nothing that makes them have to build it. They could choose not to do it. But if they have construction plans and CAB approved certain elements of the actual structure on the plans, then I think that if we get to that point and they say, we can't get this material, or we want to do this instead, and it's in the process of being built, staff has the ability to make them come back to CAB to have that changed. So something like the Bahama shutters, I think that staff would have more leeway to say, that's not the shutter that CAB approved. If you want to use that shutter instead of what was originally approved, you now need to go back to CAB. And that is actually one reason why Cowboys, or whatever they're calling it now, has been before CAB so many times. Because every time they want to change something, they've got to come back to CAB.
But if they, say their back deck, they were supposed to match, and I'm just making it up, the handrails to the Riverwalk, and they got to the end of it and said, oh, we're out of money. We're just gonna put up PVC handrails.
That was,
As long as the handrails match code, I mean, they can do it.
the plans that came before, you guys showed the handrails as matching the river walk. That's what she's saying. At that point, then code would say these materials are not correct.
Okay.
And then they would also say, planning, are you guys good for a CO? And then that's when we would say, no, that's not what CAB approved.
Oh, to back
You
up.
guys have to come back before, and that's what we do now. That's why I kind of switched to hearsay as an example, because they did receive approval, but unfortunately for them, their 2 years did run out for whatever amount of reasons. So they did come back before you guys. They didn't necessarily change anything or build something that they then said, we don't have enough money to do this, we need to change it. It was just, we ran out of the 2 years, we got to get a reapproval. So now they have a permit issued. You can kind of see here, the reapproval was done in February and the permit was officially issued in July. So they still have that leeway even after your approval. Now, they've got the July permit. So let's say in February of next year, the facade is very close to being done, and the paneling, the brown paneling that they're proposing to put here, they can't get any more. They can't get the same color, whatever the color on the spec sheet, because they turned in a spec sheet with very specific material, color, and type for this facade upgrade. They can't get that same one. So then at that point, that's when staff says, okay, you've got to go back to CAB.
But they could turn around and not install those lights
Correct.
and say, we didn't want lights on, we decided we don't want lights.
Or we're not ready for the lights at
We're not
this
ready
time.
for lights, so they don't install the lights, and it changes the look of the facility, and we just,
And that's what we were kind of touching on earlier. Lighting is a very touchy subject, because according to the approval matrix that's in your HDRD, Lighting is supposed to be done under administrative review. So it's different, a little bit different.
So
But
what-
what we have typically done is if it is a mass overhaul or a new construction, we have presented the lighting with it. But if that were to be the case where they said we can't install the lights, then at that point, staff does have the ability to say, okay, well, we can do it on administrative level, that's fine.
And I also think there's a distinction between what characteristics of a building actually make it part of the historic district.
Yeah.
You know, so the buildings themselves is what is actually part of the historic district.
Right.
Accessories like the signage or the lighting or an awning are not necessarily something that has to be on a building, and it could still keep the integrity of being a historical building. And
But
I
an awning
think
that-
that's what's difficult.
But an awning that hides non-historical stucco is, that's the one that gets me more than anything is, you know, it's historical. Historical is brick, we're tearing the brick down, we're putting stucco back. And we're gonna hide this non-historical material with the awning because it's easier to construct than having to build this funky brick lintel. It's gonna cost way too much to build. I completely understand why.
Is that stucco not all the way to the top of that building?
No, it's showing the brick down. If I'm not mistaken on that. The side is brick above, but from the brick down where it steps up is stucco, right?
And who are we to say, oh, we don't really trust you're gonna actually put the awning in, so please incur the cost.
Well, it's not
of the
necessarily
brick."
you don't trust them. It is you are now aware of what you are confined to and what you
Yes.
can or cannot allow. So that's why you're having to be specific.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily have to say it that way.
No, of course not.
And I would keep in mind, even if, what if he had the awning up and then we had a storm come through and tore it down and then he couldn't replace it? So those are all things that you have to think about, is what's really gonna have an impact on the actual building itself. I would definitely, you know, going forward, consider that when you have major projects like this. Would it be okay without an awning? Would you be okay if that didn't happen? You know, and when you say approve as presented, that's where it gets a little tricky because it wasn't included in the motion. It wasn't specific that it had to be
Yeah.
installed, which makes it hard for staff to go back and enforce it
Right.
all this time later.
That brings up another question, which I don't know the answer to. Now, if staff approves or we approve a project that has, let's say that Dollar General's got those 6 white oaks or magnolias down the left-hand side of it, white oak, which end being in. Hurricane comes through, blows those down. Are they required to replant?
Well, that Dollar General specifically is not within the CAB review district. So
It
you
was
guys.
in the tree board.
The tree board.
Tree board approved.
Correct. At that point in time, if it's a mitigation, possibly. It depends on which trees, how they were blown down, things of that nature. When it happened, how long after it happened. Natural disasters are kind of like a whole nother world.
Yeah.
That is something that if there's a natural disaster that Dollar General trees are getting blown over, I'll be a lot more worried about some other things in downtown before I would be those trees at Dollar
No,
General.
I know, that was just a for instance,
right.
like with
But
the awning it blown
that
off.
in the same sense, natural disasters are kind of their own beast.
Yeah.
And that is a very case by case basis. And that would be something we'd have to pick apart the ordinance
Yeah.
at that time with all the circumstances
With
that
all,
may
yeah,
have
not
occurred.
just that one, but I was using
Right.
any tree mitigation that goes up.
Right. Because if it's a massive natural disaster, Lord forbid, anything kind of like what Asheville experienced or
Yeah.
anything like that, I cannot, even regardless of what the ordinance says, I
You
cannot
don't,
see our
yeah.
council supporting us going after business
No.
owners to do that.
Yeah.
Regardless of motions, regardless of UDOs.
So we need to look at it.
Yeah.
When,
But
at that point, we should have denied the stucco because
Yes.
historically it's not correct. We should have denied it.
that's the thing, that's the
And
where
they
we
would
get
have to
the
spend
Conway
$20,000
against
more money.
business. Conway against business. No, Chris, you incur the cost of stair step bricking all the way around.
Yeah.
'Cause we're
Absolutely.
not- Right, but that's the thing, like, we
You
see
have
this
that
business
ability.
owner, and we're like, we wanna work
Yeah,
with
it's-
you, you're investing all this money, you're turning a pole barn into a restaurant, it's really
Unfortunately, yeah.
hard.
I get it, and
Yeah.
we have situations like that too. I'm working with a business owner right now. I completely agree and understand with every situation he's posed to us, but unfortunately, I cannot let
Yeah.
him do something that he is requesting to do because that is not allowed.
Yeah. And-
But it's one of those things is we're unfortunately tasked with that job. You guys, when you accept your role on this board, are unfortunately tasked with, those are going to be hard decisions. Tree board decisions, they are going to be tough.
And about tree board over here, Dollar General, I'm just gonna say, what happens if they're like, oh, whoopsie daisy, we had our irrigation turned off for 3 months?
They
All
have
the
to
trees-
replace
all the trees
mitigation.
died. That's the other thing, right?
Mitigation trees that are planted for mitigation purposes are required to be maintained in perpetuity, and they have to be replaced regardless of the 1 year, regardless of 15 years down the road. Mitigation is simply that, mitigation. Now, other landscaping, that's a different discussion.
Okay, thank you, Kate.
Yep.
And that's the beauty of Conway, other than other municipalities, is we actually look at the cost of the business. And Conway does a great job of supporting businesses and making the decision in favor of what's right,
Right.
not what is written in black and white all the
Right.
time. And that's the beauty of Conway, and we don't want to get away from that.
Sure.
But we need help on the other side of, we make that a concession. So in that situation, we should have still allowed the stucco, but said if you want to use stucco, you have to have an awning, you have to keep the awning up at all times. And that would have been a great compromise, because that's what, we need to compromise, not just stick it to them, because, you know, Chris doesn't need to spend $20,000 on a brick wall there.
Just because we say so, right?
Right, but he
it's-
needs to put an awning up, because that's what he submitted.
Yeah,
I had to step out.
okay, Mike Coker.
Staff did add, just FYI, when it was time for a CO, I remember him saying that it was, he could not get the material, it was a back order issue.
Yeah, it was back order,
at
then
that
it got
time.
too expensive, and
Yes.
Okay.
So just to kind of backtrack a little bit, kind of figured that some questions would come up and we'd just bounce around, so that's fine. But I did want to kind of go over this list because this was just kind of a bullet point of making sure we did want to cover these tonight. And we have touched on some of these, but approval does not equal requirement, like we just discussed. CAB approvals are good for 2 years. And planning staff cannot and does not control the project progress after the submittal or after approval from CAB. We are then at their mercy. If they want to let the 2 years lapse and wait 15 years and then come back and get approval for the exact same thing they got approved for, that is totally up to the property owner, business owner, whatever be the case, so long as they are not in violation of any other department enforcements, like code enforcement. There may be situations where it's a vacant lot. They want to build something on it. You guys see it twice, don't offer a final approval, but get really close to one, and then they just disappear for 5 years. That is completely up to that property owner. We have zero control over that, and we cannot require it. Do we like it? No. Would we like to see things that are proposed come to fruition? Absolutely. But we understand it at the same time. Standards and requests that are enforced by CAB. There's been discussion. I know we all have talked about tinting downtown. That was a very hot topic item, especially with the recent Theater of the Republic that came forward. There was discussion with council that we took before council on possible text amendments, things of that nature, to see what council's input and how they felt about tinting being allowed in the downtown district, since there are now options that can provide tinting for a business owner without it being very noticeable, but still could be noticeable, and council was completely against it. They are fine with other alternatives like blinds or curtains or things of that nature, because in their mind and their statement was, if the business owner wants to put up blinds and block someone from possibly seeing into an inventory or a new item that they just got in stock, then that's up to the business owner. That's their prerogative. If they feel that their items are being what is the word, faded, damaged because of the sun, then they have options of blinds, curtains, things of that nature to put up rather than tinting. Because in council's mind, they would prefer to preserve the exterior look and view of our Main Street downtown area and prevent the tinting where we can, and have CAB also not allow for the tinting. There are clear ceramic tints though, and they did discuss that, so long as there is zero appearance change, then they would be okay with like a clear, absolutely clear, no refraction, anything like that. And I know there's some very expensive ceramic tint that can do that. But I know that was discussed with all of us not long ago, council.
Tint is not allowed at all.
Correct.
Okay.
Except with the exception of the windows that come tinted, preloaded.
Right.
Yes.
They're low E required.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
which is
like
required by
code
the building
requirements
code.
and stuff.
But the whole point is you want people to be able to see into the establishment. Somebody might see something going on or whatever, they may not want to enter that establishment. So if you tint the windows, then it kind of prevents the pedestrian from being able to see what's going on inside
Yep.
the restaurant or the retail establishment.
And that was something, that's an example of if you guys have items that you want council to relook at or rediscuss that may or may not be touched on in the guidelines, that you guys want them to say, hey, this hasn't been an issue before, but now we're seeing a lot of this. Can council give us kind of where they're at? You can bring that up to staff during board input. You guys can request staff, have you talked to council? Has this ever been discussed? Is there a possibility of this being discussed? And then staff will take it to council and fill out council, see what their thoughts are on the topic, and if they want to pursue or no, and then we would report back to the board. But there's not like an official send an email kind of thing or fill out an application for a request, and you guys cannot request text amendments in the UDO or control text amendments in the UDO. It's strictly what you have purview over in the guidelines. So if it's a requirement in the UDO, you guys cannot request it of council to review it or vote on it.
But the Unified Development Ordinance actually does in several areas state that properties within the historic design review districts shall comply with the community appearance guidelines. So that's kind of the segue into the, community appearance board, is that if it is within a historic design review districts, the UDO requires them to be in compliance with the guidelines, whatever those may be.
And seek your approval in accordance to the guidelines.
So if there's something that's not really working out for us, like we're seeing this issue like bubble up, it's just sort of reoccurring, we're better off changing the CAB guidelines.
So
I can't think of an example of something.
yeah, that's
like,
what, it really kind of depends. And changing CAB guidelines isn't as easy
as changing
as
the
you
UDO.
I can think
as
of an
anything.
example.
I mean, any of it.
So, at one point, there were many signs coming in that questioned the dimensional signage. And so, we were seeing things that were very shallow depth.
Right.
But, at that point, it's like, well, how dimensioned does something have to be as a minimum? And there was, this is actually going pretty far back, but there was discussion about, well, what if we put a minimum on there? And then there was because that would fix it all, right? But then there was the discussion about, well, that's where the purview of the board comes in and the opinion of the board based on each circumstances. So, and how difficult it is to change the CAB guidelines.
So dimensional standards, again, it's kind of like lighting and painting, not necessarily because of administrative review, but because of a few caveats that are in there. But dimensional standards for signage states when it is attached to the building. So what we did here, we'll give a couple examples. And I know this isn't always how it has been done or interpreted. But we've never really received a whole lot of pushback on it either. But per UD or HDRD guidelines, it is the hanging signs here on the left and right and kind of in the middle here. All of these are historic signs, one of which displays a historic district in Arlington, Massachusetts. And they are all flat, non-dimensional signs because they are not physically themselves the sign that is attached to the face of the building or the side of the building. But you can see the old post office place sign. That is a dimension. It doesn't really look like it here because it's so far away, but it is and does provide dimension because it is attached to the building. So like a monument sign, a hanging bracket sign, a freestanding post sign, anything of that nature is not technically required to provide any dimension whatsoever.
Well, and the guidelines state that it, you know, they are or appear to be.
Appears.
So it's not even a requirement that they have actual dimension. Staff's opinion is that with the exception of wall signs, you know, these types of signs and any freestanding sign like a monument sign is dimensional in itself. Obviously, we have been not necessarily making them, but, you know, encouraging them. You can bring it to CAB, however, they're gonna be looking for dimension.
Right. And I recall the hot dog that burned down.
Joey
Oh,
Dog.
yeah. I was
Joey
like,
Dog.
what?
They brought a sign before us at the time, and then I believe they illustrated a shadow line, which at that time was approved, I believe.
It
But
gave the appearance of
But we had
dimension.
struggled with the sign several times, and then they did that, and then we're like, okay.
Right. And I know this sign, for example, they did provide dimension here because, again, like Jessica stated, staff has just said, hey, look, it's got to be dimensional or give the appearance of dimension. That's what we put in our email every time. How they interpret it is how the sign company interprets it. But a lot of times we do tell them the board does prefer to see dimension. However, it is not a requirement. Especially on a sign of this nature because it is a hanging bracket sign.
You know, let me ask you this then. This comes in front of us without dimension on it, straight painted.
Yep.
And the sign company says, hey, this is the sign, the dimensions, in fact, is not attached to the building.
Right.
Do we have the ability to turn it down because it doesn't have dimension letters?
If you can find a way in the guidelines that strictly say that you can deny it, but I'm not sure that you would be able to.
What you're saying, we don't have that ability.
Right, because it's not a requirement.
So how do we change it and say the sign must have dimension?
See?
I'm not sure that that is something we can always discuss with council if that is something that they would be willing to look at. I'm not sure if they would be willing to go for that because
I think that when this came up years ago, we were getting a lot of flat, basic signs. And we're like, where, you know, you're bringing this business before us and it's like you're cutting every dollar and let's not make it the signage on the front of the building that's the cheapest thing that you're replacing. Because at that time, Conway wasn't as booming as it is now.
That's right.
And
3D
now,
3D printers weren't at every
but
turn.
back then, like we were having a lot of places change just the name and then move in with no renovation, interior renovations. And it was just the 2x2 ceiling tiles, and maybe they painted them black, and they just changed the chairs, or kept the tables and chairs that were there previously, and it was a new name and a new business. Fortunately, that's not what we're seeing as much now.
Right.
People are wanting to put more effort and more design input to make, because they feel that you guys have put forth the effort to make this place great, and they're getting charged with that to make their place great. So kudos to you for that. But when when we were talking about it back then, we were just getting a lot of basic signage.
Yeah, and I know when I first started, it was, you know, downtown was dead. You know, there wasn't as much going on, and I think that you know, the economy took a downturn, and I think Conway was, being a lot more lenient on businesses just to be able to get the downtown going. So a few years after I was here, there was discussion about being, about requiring, you know, more stringent standards when it comes to signage and having that dimension. So what we would tell people coming in is, you know, if you want to do a wall sign, that's great, but here's what, you know, CAB is going to look for. Why don't you ask for window signage right now? There's no law and no rule that you have to install a wall sign or a hanging bracket sign. So it'd be better if you could just do window graphics. So I know that there were times that businesses would come forward with just window graphics so that they could get going and have their business advertised. And then they'd come back later and ask approval for a wall sign that, you know, met the guidelines better.
Mhm. But again, devil's advocate, we can always ask council their standpoint now on that. However, they have always been and tend to still be business friendly. And I can foresee them being worried that there would be an instance to where a mom and pop business moves in, they're ready to open the doors, they've had all this construction cost, they're barely affording the rent, the inventory, all the things. They can't afford a 3-dimensional sign.
And then you say what Jessica just said.
Correct. However, they still have the
They
ability
have the right.
to put the sign up. You cannot prevent them from doing so.
But again, I think that's where we were at one point while I was on the board. And again, fortunately, that's not where we are now. But even this sign, like, even if it were flat, they've at least taken some initiative to round some corners, to make it,
Right.
give it some sort of, you know,
Zhuzh.
betterment. So, and that's where, you know, I was pushing back then, like, hey, we need to make a minimum, because this is a repetitive pattern all the time. And it was, well, that's where we need to have the ability as a board to give input, you know, and leeway.
But if that sign came in front of us and it was just a square rectangle that says Anderson Brothers or ABB Administration Building straight out, and they come in front and we said, no, we want something like this, and the applicant can say, no, we thought about it, we just don't want to spend the money, we don't like the look, you talk about, we want just a flat square rectangle, we're gonna put the stickers on the sign and go.
You could always request
We
that
can-
they add dimension, but they wouldn't necessarily be required to do so.
And I'll be honest with you, I've never had anybody that when they are told to, you know, go back to the drawing board,
Yeah.
that says if they don't approve it, I'll just appeal it and not sue.
Yeah.
Of course, they could appeal your decision. That's why every decision you make should be rooted in
Yeah.
what the guidelines say, and that covers the board. But I've never had anybody who was not willing to at least go back and address the concerns, and we always try to do that before it comes before you, because we already know what the issues could be.
So the flip side is we had that security company that was next to the council, where the counseling place is now, the security.
It's Century 21 now?
Yeah, they came to us and they followed the guidelines. They had plain old text, but they like 1990s like shadow boxed it like in clip art, and they had the clip art of the eagle, and it's like by the letter they're hitting all the marks. I would almost rather them come to us and ask for our input and us be able to have that conversation, and then them presenting something that is technically correct
So
but
unfortunately,
looks not so nice.
with that one, that one's a little bit different because the sign type itself was a completely different
Is it a
sign.
monument sign?
It was, yeah, it's a monument sign, but it was also an interior illuminated cabinet sign. So that would be extremely expensive, extremely difficult to go from appearing dimension to actual dimension.
Yeah.
It'd have to be
And
blow
that's
molded.
not actually an attached sign.
Correct. So it wouldn't even be required.
Okay, but I guess my point is like someone comes to us with like the block letters with the fake shadow and like clip art. We're like,
We
please
could
no.
always encourage applicants, you know, to say, you know, I got your application, I encourage you to go for a consent. If we feel, and we kind of, I know Katie, she's been doing this long enough now, can get a sense of what she thinks the issues may be.
Yeah.
She could encourage conceptual review before they actually submit for final review.
And this sign, as an example, we worked with these guys weeks before this ever came before y'all. I mean, there was surveys involved, there was historic, checking back to involve, because it was just the bracket sign. We had to figure out if it had to be considered abandoned. What could we allow it because of the abandonment of a sign portion of our ordinance? There was weeks of work with this between the applicant, the property owner, and us before it was ever brought to y'all. And like Jessica said, we always do encourage. I have a pretty basic blanket email that I send to sign companies, especially sign companies that are not familiar with CAB when they first come before you guys. And I always tell them, hey, dimension or the appearance of dimension is required. However, the board does prefer dimension. And then I see what they send back to us. And we have not had anyone that just kind of stood 10 toes down and was like, absolutely not, I'm not doing this.
And y'all do such a great job. We're not
Yeah.
seeing those. We really
Right.
appreciate it and recognize it.
Yeah,
These are the approved as presented moments that we
Right.
just move on, and we're so thankful.
that we took weeks to get to.
Yeah.
Exactly. Y'all do a great job on that. We appreciate it so much.
Yeah, but I mean, and I know it was a concern and it was brought up, so we definitely wanted to talk to you guys about it, and kind of clarify.
And we can, as we go through the guidelines and see things that need to be updated, if you guys, look through them and see anything that you have questions on or that you think needs to be changed, you can email us or bring us a list, and when we do the update, we'll discuss it. You guys would have to vote on any updates to the guidelines, and then we'll take it before council as well.
Okay.
And then make sure we hit on everything.
Thank you for doing this too.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been wonderful.
We knew it, you guys probably wanted it and needed it. We
Yeah.
did too, because there was a couple things that digging into this, we were like, oh, okay. We need to make sure that's clear. And then any complaints, so this was a big one too, because I know Dollar General as an example. That one's come up a couple times talking with you guys, and we always have to say, that's outside of the CAB review district. Unfortunately, planning staff would not have any control over certain things when it comes to a certain point. Let's say a property is within the CAB review district, but the specific request that you have is outside your purview, which means there's nothing in the guidelines addressing that you have the authority to review or say. And even then, even if it is listed in the guidelines, you guys are considered a review board. So unless it has an application attached to it that staff brings before you guys, then this board cannot request or require any type of enforcement to be done. Those types of things would have to be handled by our property maintenance department or our stormwater department or sanitation. It all depends on the request or the complaint or concern. And
There is that one section in the UDO that talks about neglect or maintenance of historic properties, and you guys have actually used that a few times. A good example is the building at the corner of 4th Avenue and Laurel Street. There were some brick issues, and he had to hire a structural engineer to see about getting that fixed. A letter was sent letting them know that they were in violation of that particular section of the UDO, which you should have in your binder. It's in Article 14. But there is a section that talks about lack of maintenance or neglect on buildings within a historic design review district. But typically, like Katie said, that would most likely have to involve the building official. Just because it, might not look as presentable anymore. It's a very fine line that we have to walk from our standpoint. But obviously, if there are some major issues with the property and the building, then code enforcement is going to be your first line of defense.
And you've got a great code enforcement department. They really are.
so for like example, we saw these guys our last meeting. This awning, it looked rough and it did need to be pressure washed. But like Jessica was saying earlier in the meeting, the awning is not what makes this structure historic. And also, this awning, structurally, it might not look great, but structurally, there may not have been any issues with it. So at that point in time, this board would not have anything that they could require or request that specific property owner to do with the awning at that time. However, you could request property maintenance to go out and do things, because they have their own separate property maintenance code and their own separate ordinance within the general code that allows for court summons, a different process. It takes time. Trust me, I used to do it. It's tough. It's tough to get cooperation as well. There's first notice. There's 10 to 20 days, sometimes 30, depends on what the complaint is. You have to follow up. If the person contacts you and says, hey, I'm working on this, but I'm waiting on a quote from somebody, they went out of town for 2 weeks, you got to extend it. You have to give them a time to attempt to make it right. So it may look like nothing's being done, but I can promise you somebody somewhere in this city has wheels turning in some kind of shape or form. And I did put hearsay up here as well for that example as well, to kind of give a background and Cowboys of, so like the red here just kind of shows this is the only point in time throughout this entire process for hearsay that this board could have or would have been involved whatsoever. That also includes our planning staff to a certain extent. We would definitely work with the building department, and we do work with them. They come to us a good bit and say, hey, what have you guys already approved or denied? Where are they at on their approval? Can we do this? Do they still have time where we can't approach them? And then you can see there was a demo permit. So then at that point in time, when a demo permit is issued, then they technically are in the process of working on it. So then we're stuck. We can't really say a whole lot to them. Then an expired permit. So you can see here the first notice, second notice, court summons. That was all done by our building department. All of these that are outside of red were done by our building department or our construction services department, or code enforcement. And that kind of stuff is going on behind the scenes when it looks like absolutely nothing's happening. But it's a process, and it's legal process. Then you get the courts involved, and a judge could say, well, I'll give you 60 days or 30 days, or I'm going to give you a fine and give you this amount. Those are the types of things that we necessarily sometimes aren't even aware are going on. It depends on the situation. But that's also stuff that the public certainly isn't always aware. It is public information. You can access it on BSNA on our online portal. But this is some of the reasons as to why staff can't and doesn't really give a lot of project updates along, because there's stuff like this that happens that we don't know sometimes, or it's out of our control.
And the last thing that you would want, and that staff really doesn't want, is to write a summons.
Correct.
So using Crooked Oak again as an example, let's say that it was a condition of approval that they have the awning, and then we write them a ticket because they didn't install the awning. We have that right, we could do that, but then once we issue that ticket, it's no longer in our hands. We no longer have control. It's completely up to the judge, and the judge could dismiss the ticket entirely. She could just continue it on and on. He could request a jury trial. We have one property that built something without a permit, and it took 3 years just through the appeals process that he had a right to get anything done. So we always try as much as possible to keep things within our department, because we feel like that sets a better tone.
Oh, it does.
And you're more apt to get them to comply that way.
And the same thing with Cowboys. You guys are very familiar with them, but the brief synopsis of it is everything you can see here in red or outside of red. This is anything that is logged into our BSNA system, which is where we track permits, we track reviews, we track variances, property maintenance issues, permits, CAB reviews. We track all of that through BSNA, but there is a lot of things that occur and a lot of discussions, a lot of back and forth that is not logged this way because it's either via email or an in-person meeting, or there was a couple different times council had to have a few executive session discussions because of additional property lines or changing property lines. There's plating actions, all kinds of things that me as the CAB liaison would not be involved in or privy to unless someone who's aware of it personally came to me and asked, what did your board do? Or what did they say? Where did you leave this? So it's very hard for us to be able to keep you guys updated on especially big stuff like this or like hearsay, because there is so many moving parts that sometimes we don't know. We're left out until we absolutely need to be included in it.
And that's the beauty of Conway, especially with the present staff and planning, that you're able to work in that gray area to make things happen best for the city and the businesses, and not just thou shalt do this, you don't do it, we don't care. Because Conway cares, and it's very appreciative that we recognize y'all do care and
Because
work with people.
we're just like you guys. We would love to see a steakhouse or another business of any kind on the riverfront or anywhere within the city limits, because it's great for the city, it's great for business. But again, we can't control it and we can't necessarily regulate it outside of the original approvals or revisions and things of that nature. Trying to think.
We can talk about the meeting.
Oh, yes. Wait, for,
The meetings, how.
oh, yes. I have that one. So there is a potential, and we wanted to discuss with with you guys tonight to see if it is something that you guys would be amenable to. But there has been discussion of, now that the downtown district is so full, and it being a lot less CAB reviews and a lot more heavy tree reviews, that the ordinance has been updated and being enforced correctly at this point in time, if the board would be amenable to, instead of 2 times a month, to once a month and at 5:30 instead of 4. That way it would help some of you with traffic, not having to take as much time off of work, things like that. And I don't foresee the meetings being extremely long. I feel like this has been our longest meeting in a very long time. So it would not necessarily change the duration of our meetings. It would just change the frequency of how fast and how many.
That gonna hurt our service to our people, because if you want to submit something, now you're waiting.
Well, we can,
The return time, the more of
Right.
being the customer service, I would hate to
And
see
that
that.
was, and it's going to be up to council at the end of the day, because it would be a text amendment. But they definitely want us to get your kind of input on it, if you guys would be okay with the change before we take it to them.
and we wouldn't have to change the time. I mean, if you just want to change it to once a month.
No,
it's
that's
still
what
the
concerns
same
me, is the
time.
once a month. If somebody's coming in, making a submittal, and they miss it, whatever, now they're a whole nother month out, or, you know.
No,
Especially if we
people
say come back with a new plan.
come back
it's
with a new
another
plan.
month.
I feel bad for the people we're reviewing, not having it less frequent than it is now, I think hurts them, and hurts City of Conway's customer service that we're so good at.
Well, and yes, and possibly no, because like we were saying, the reason there was the 2 times a month at the time was because the downtown was so desolate, and we were trying to get them in, get them out as fast as possible. But now it's to a point where we very rarely have requests or anything of that nature. And the tree board and CAB, some items on CAB, the review turnaround time for receiving an application so our deadline for the next meeting for this year would be this Friday is the deadline, which means they can submit up to this Friday to then be on our next available meeting. So that only gives city staff 1 week. So it's Monday to Friday to be able to do all research, all back and forth with applicants, waiting on the applicant to give you updated renderings, waiting for payments, because that's the other thing, is we now require a review fee, waiting for different applicants to then talk to the business owner to get their input on a different design change or a request. that all takes a lot of time that is very condensed at this point in time. And with the amount of businesses already in really well renovated areas downtown currently, most of the stuff that we are seeing outside of a sign would be larger projects that would take more time, would need to be more fine-tooth combed to go through to make sure that muntings aren't missed on a construction plan, or to make sure the Bahama shades are properly labeled as the board had requested. And then the tree board, especially the tree board, those submittals are quite intensive. Just like the one that we had with Diamond Shores, I spent probably 4 straight days on that one request, and I counted and calculated and counted and calculated and wrote and rewrote and had other people read it to make sure it sounded correctly, because it was all running together by that point. And it's only not because staff doesn't want to do it and can't do it. We will and we do. It's just a lot more, it's quicker, it's a faster turnaround, and it's more intensive on larger requests. A sign, that wouldn't be that big of a deal.
CAB used to have to do all of the city of Conway.
Yeah.
The city of Myrtle Beach, I believe they still do the entire city, and they're there for 4 and 5, sometimes 8 hours, you know, reviewing stuff. So, you know, we're definitely thankful that, you know, it's not the entire city, because you guys would have to camp out for a while. But it's not something that we have to do. It's just something that we thought about doing because of the deadlines. Thankfully, we don't require public hearings. There are some places that actually everything that goes to CAB is a public hearing. So property owners get notified, and trust me, if you come to a few planning commission meetings,
You won't want
realize
that.
that you don't want to do that.
There'd be a lot more public here.
So is the catalyst to have this go to council for the change based upon your specific requests for the?
It's up to the board. If y'all.
So I'm asking, is it easier for you, and that's why this is like a talking point? Because if it's easier for you, I support it.
I'll be honest. It's there's a lot of times it's hard to get a quorum, and so we figured if it was once a month versus 2 times a month, and maybe changing the time because of traffic, because of work, that maybe we, you know, wouldn't have to worry about a quorum as much. That's really was the main catalyst for staff thinking maybe if we change it to once a month and change the time, it would be easier.
It's all, but I'm thinking, and I'm personally, there's one coming in front of us I'm gonna have to excuse myself from, but the change occurred, you make the submittal, and it should have happened today, and now we're gonna be, that store's gonna be opening, and I'm not an owner of it, but the store's gonna be opening without a sign, because the sign company didn't do their job, which they specifically said they did. And now, if that's the case, it would be submitted, and it's a whole nother month. I think a month is too, from a customer service standpoint, I think we're too far out, and it may be that and I'm terrible about it, we as the board members need to be more responsive in returning emails saying, yes, I will be here, and I'm probably the worst one at it lately, and I apologize. But I think we need, you know, from a customer service standpoint, I think it needs to be more than a month. And also, if a submission comes to you, like the Diamond Shores tree thing, it should have all the calculations on it. If it's not submitted the way it's supposed to be submitted, you should have the ability to say, hey, I'm sorry, we can't review this now because this, and this not on there.
They are required to provide certain things to staff
Right.
before we can accept it and place it on an agenda. And there are a lot of times that we go back and forth and tell them, I still need this, I still need that. It's not going on this agenda because I don't have it, and I'm going to need that time. So there are times where we have to work with, most of the time it's developers. A lot of times, sometimes sign companies, the Sinclair gas station, that monument sign, that was a beast to figure out, surprisingly, but it's a very unique site, so it took weeks of back and forth between us, the designer, the sign company, the owner. It was a lot. So that does happen to where sometimes they submit and we just send it back and say, hey, I don't have enough. But we can't necessarily put the entire burden on them to provide all the calculations, because even when they submit for a full TRC civil review on a subdivision or a commercial design, there are still things that they do not calculate correctly. We still have to verify, and we still have to change it. We send it back to them, they update it or don't.
And everybody's busy, and they say, well, this is not 100% right, but will you please do me a favor and get it through? And y'all are very good about doing that.
Well, a lot of times you have to remember, people are submitting tree surveys, especially. Every municipality is different. Horry County has different standards. So, the engineer would really have to know what the ordinance as good as we do in order to get it right. So that's why, and even if it is right, we still are charged with making sure that it is accurate.
Yeah.
But changing it to once a month, it was just something that staff had, thought of. All of our other meetings are at 5:30, with the exception of city council, but we can keep it just like it is. That's perfectly fine.
Do you want to vote a little straw vote?
And it also wouldn't-
what's your
It's not-
opinion?
That's okay.
My opinion is for CAB every other week, for tree board once a month is fine. As Mackenzie said, I don't know about the other architects in town, but our clients are always in a rush to get things going.
Well, that's another thing with the tree board though, is that a tree could be dead and it could be about to fall on someone's house, and they have to go through the process, and so it could be, a situation where they need to get approval as well.
The Parker's Kitchen situation, that's a very good example, because this board saw it and heard it twice. And they're actually going to BZA on Thursday, because the way that it fell was they couldn't get the planting for the fine that was associated to them for the improper pruning. They couldn't fit all the plantings on the property, so then they had to mitigate with a fee in lieu. So they chose to cut a very extensively large check to ensure that they could get a CO when they needed to, and now are pursuing a variance or an appeal of the tree board's decision to BZA, or staff's decision, to BZA of the amount of the penalty that was assessed, in hopes that they can receive a portion or all of the reimbursement back. But there are situations where the meeting dates just don't line up, even with existing meetings, and a lot of people, they figure out what they gotta do to do what they need to, and then we work and try and help them figure it out. But even if it did change, it would not change this year.
Yeah.
It would have to be something.
Oh, I know, but I just don't, I think we need to keep it
I got you.
unless
Yeah,
it's a
if
huge
If the
reason.
board would like to keep it like it is, that's certainly fine with staff.
So would anybody be amenable to what Jerry had stated as far as CAB every 2 weeks, and maybe tree board on the second CAB agenda? Once tree board once a month, CAB every 2 weeks? Or is it just like you'd rather keep everything 2 weeks?
From your all's end, which one's the heavier burden, CAB or tree board?
It depends on the
requests?
week. Depends on the week.
Because like from our end, tree board, sometimes it has something, sometimes it doesn't have something. I mean, like one day might be heavy and then we go for
Yeah.
2 months with hardly anything. So
Yeah.
like from my perspective, the tree board's not a burden at all. It's more that we take a long time on some of those tree board requests because we have empathy for the
Yeah.
owners, and we're trying to figure out how to deal with that. I don't feel like that's a big burden on our end, though.
I agree.
I think
That's
if you're
fine.
gonna meet for CAB, I would think that it would make sense to continue with the tree board on.
Yeah, you're
those
already gonna
second
be
days.
here.
Right. Yeah. And again, like Jerry and Mackenzie, I mean, I've got projects where if I needed to submit for a CAB, if we're like tracking and we're a week after that CAB or a day after or whatever, it could definitely set that project back, 'cause then you're back a month.
That's fine.
Understood.
Yeah. And then,
And to your point, if we are we have the burden of being jammed up with businesses that are bustling, and then hopefully there are some new constructions that are coming in that would impact more.
Yeah. Well, I think that's everything that I had kind of ironed out to
Thank
cover.
you.
If y'all have any questions or anything else you would like to discuss, we can.
Yeah, is there any public input or board input about the workshop?
Oh, speaking of board
Yes.
input, I'm sorry. For items, or I can't remember if we discussed this or not, there was so much. But items or topics or locations or anything like that that you would like for staff to formally look into, or for staff to let you know if that is or is not something we could handle, or if it's something that the board even has the ability to request of staff, that would all need to be done during board input, I'm sorry. And then at the time of staff input, the next week, we could update if there was an ability to answer the question, or if this board had the purview over what the request or the question was. So like if you ask us a property maintenance question and we know the day of that you're asking it, we're gonna have to tell you that's property maintenance, you'd have to contact construction services. That's not our department, we're not sure. But if it was something in regards to, did we approve that sign that way? Then staff could go research it and come back and provide you an update the next week at staff input. But just make sure that it's on the board input level. That way it's on record that you guys requested it of us, and that's why we're calling out certain businesses and updating, because what we don't want is staff to appear as if we're bringing up businesses that were unprovoked and then it appear like we're not business friendly.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of one other finishing line. You said board input, that made me think of it. Sorry.
Okay, so if we notice something in the community that is in the historic district that is not within our purview.
Correct.
You can tell us that's not in our purview.
Correct.
Okay.
And we could potentially even, depending on what it is, and if we need to see it to better
Yeah.
understand, we may even be able to tell you at the time who to contact or what
Yeah,
department it would be.
A while back, Carolina Appliances had like a rusted, metal, tin sign, and it was rusting and like half of it had fallen down.
Mm-hmm. See, that would be more like a property maintenance thing.
Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
Because even though you guys, if he chose to install a new sign, you guys would have purview and control over the new sign design to an extent. You as a board wouldn't necessarily have the ability to send our planning staff to go enforce, regulate, or anything of that
Right.
nature. That would be, we would have to defer it to the building department, which would be when you as a board or a citizen at that point would just contact the building department on your own behalf. And then they would look into it, officially look into it.
I mean, if it's a sign, you're saying it was just a sign that was.
I'm just
rusted?
an example from long ago. Like it was the 10 Carolina appliance on the side of the wall. Like it was rusted, and like half of the Carolina was there, but appliance had like fallen off in one of the storms. And it was like
Yeah.
6 or 8 months later. I'm like, why is that still halfway?
Yeah, you just didn't update it or fix it or anything like that. Yeah.
Just those are the type of things that I see kind of around town, and I was like, I don't know.
And see, even that, if we tell you property maintenance, when you contact them, they'll do their own quote unquote investigation of it or looking into it, and then they'll be able to tell you whether or not exactly what is happening on that property, if there's anything within their code or their ordinance that they could address. And then sometimes it's just one of those that's in limbo where nobody really has an actual jurisdiction over saying it because it's not a life safety or anything of that nature, or the building itself is not structurally compromised.
Okay.
So,
But I mean, you could email us, and I forward emails to code enforcement staff. You know,
Right.
if I know that it's within their purview, anybody can email us, and if we can do something about it, we will, and if not, then we'll forward it to the appropriate
yeah.
person, you know.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Okay, thank you. All right. So we're in board input. Any other inputs? Staff input.
My whole day was staff.
Thank you. All right. We should adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Approved.